Gold just did something it has not done in decades, and almost nobody is talking about it. While you were watching the price on your phone go down, something much bigger was happening behind the scenes. Something that could quietly change how your savings, your retirement, and your government's money actually work. Right now, gold is trading near $4,000 an ounce, down almost 30%. From the record high it hit back in January. If you only look at that chart, it looks like a crash. It looks like the party is over, but that is not the real story. The real story is what is happening underneath that price. And once you see it, you will never look at a falling gold chart the same way again. If you are interested in money, investing, gold, silver, and protecting your financial future, subscribe to Money Insights and like this video, because every week we break down the biggest financial stories in simple English. Here's the part that should make you sit up straight. While ordinary investors in the West have been pulling their money out of gold funds for months, something almost nobody expected has been happening at the same time. Central banks, the very institutions that print and manage the world's money, have been buying gold at a pace not seen in generations. Two completely different groups are staring at the exact same asset and doing the exact opposite thing. And when that happens in a market, it usually means one side knows something the other side does not. Let's rewind to January of this year. Gold hit an all-time high, just above $5,500 an ounce. Picture the scene. Trading floors lit up green, financial channels running images of stacked gold bars across the bottom of the screen, analysts calling it the trade of the decade. It felt unstoppable. Then something changed. Inflation numbers stayed stubborn. Oil prices climbed as conflict flared in the Middle East, with strikes and counterstrikes disrupting shipping routes the world depends on to move energy from one continent to another. Every time tension rose near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the narrowest and most important waterways on the planet for oil tankers, gas prices at the pump ticked higher, and so did fears about inflation. Then came the piece almost nobody had fully priced in. The new Federal Reserve Chair, Kevin Warsh, took a harder line on interest rates than markets expected. Suddenly, the story shifted from rates are coming down to rates might actually need to go up again. Traders who tracked the odds of a rate move watched the probability of a September hike swing wildly within weeks, at one point surging from under 30% to well above 60%. That single shift in expectation was enough to knock gold down nearly 30% from its peak in just 6 months. Here is why that connection matters. Explained simply, gold does not pay you interest. If you hold a bond or a savings account instead and interest rates rise, that alternative suddenly looks more attractive by comparison because it is now paying you more just to sit there and do nothing. Gold cannot compete on that front, so when rate expectations shift upward quickly, gold often takes the hit first and hardest. That is the textbook relationship. It is real, and it explains a large piece of this year's pullback. But textbook relationships only explain part of the story, and this is exactly where most coverage of the gold market stops digging. We are going to keep going. Picture a family sitting at their kitchen table, the evening news playing in the background, watching the price of gold slide on the screen, wondering if the small stack of coins they bought last year was a mistake. Maybe they bought it as a wedding gift fund, or as a hedge for retirement, or simply because a friend told them it was smart. That feeling, that doubt, is exactly what happens every time a bull market takes a breather. It is a very human reaction. Nobody enjoys watching an investment lose value on paper, even temporarily. But here's where everything changes. While that family was worrying over their coffee, halfway around the world, in a marble government building most people will never set foot inside, a central bank was quietly placing an order for several tons of physical gold bars. Not gold on a screen, not a certificate, not a paper claim sitting in someone else's ledger. Actual metal poured into standardized bars, loaded under armed guard, shipped into a vault and locked away for years, maybe decades, with no plan to ever sell it in a hurry. Two completely different transactions, two completely different mindsets, same asset. Let's talk about what a central bank actually is, in plain terms. Think of it like the reserve fund of an entire country. Just like a family keeps some savings tucked away for emergencies, a country's central bank keeps reserves, usually in the form of foreign currency or gold, to protect the value of its own money and to have something solid to fall back on if trust in paper currency ever wobbles. For most of the last 50 years, the reserve of choice was the US dollar, usually held in the form of US government bonds, essentially IOUs from the United States government. That has been the deal since the 1970s, when the world moved away from gold-backed currencies entirely. But that deal appears to be quietly changing, and almost nobody is asking why. According to survey data collected this year, a record share of central banks around the world, roughly 45% of those surveyed, said they expect to increase their own gold reserves over the next year. Only 1% said they expected to reduce them, Read that gap again. 45% planning to buy more, 1% planning to sell. Almost nobody noticed this shift happening in real time because it does not show up as a single dramatic headline the way a stock market crash does. It shows up slowly, ton by ton, shipment by shipment, month after month, hidden inside quarterly reports that most people never open, and the numbers behind that survey are not small. In the first 3 months of this year alone, central banks added a net 244 tons of gold to their reserves, more than their average pace over the previous 5 years, and they kept adding through the spring, with a further 41 tons reported in May alone. Poland added gold. The Czech National Bank added gold. China's central bank has now extended a buying streak that has lasted 18 consecutive months without a single pause, an unusually long and disciplined run for any institution, let alone one managing the reserves of the world's second largest economy. Some analysts now argue that gold has overtaken U.S. government bonds as the single largest asset class held across global central bank reserves combined, a structural shift that took decades to build and, according to those tracking it closely, is unlikely to unwind quickly. Stop and think about what that actually means. The very institutions responsible for managing entire national currencies are choosing to hold more of an asset that earns no interest, pays no dividend, and simply sits in a vault collecting dust. Why would they do that? At the exact same moment regular investors are heading for the exits. This is where the hidden connection starts to reveal itself. Here's the part most people miss. Retail investors in Western exchange-traded funds, the kind of gold fund you might buy through a regular brokerage account, tend to react to short-term signals, interest rates, currency movements. This year's shift toward a hawkish Fed under Chair Warsh, combined with a stronger dollar, made holding non-interest-bearing gold less attractive in the short run, at least on paper. So money flowed out. Billions of dollars worth of gold, sitting inside exchange-traded funds, got sold as investors chased other opportunities, or simply grew nervous. But central banks are not playing the same game. They are not trying to catch this month's trend. They are managing something much bigger and slower moving, something historians would recognize instantly if they looked at the data: concern about debt. Here's a number that might genuinely shock you. Global government debt, adding up countries all over the world, crossed a record $353 trillion in the first half of this year. The share of that debt owed specifically by governments themselves is now closing in on 1/3 of the total, also an all-time high. Imagine a household that keeps taking out new loans just to pay the interest on old loans. At some point, the people lending that household money start to wonder whether they will ever be paid back in anything of real, lasting value. Governments cannot go bankrupt the way a household can, but they can quietly let their currency lose purchasing power over time, which has the same practical effect on anyone holding that currency or bonds denominated in it. Gold, unlike a dollar bill or government bond, cannot be printed by any government on earth. Nobody can hold a meeting and vote to create more of it overnight. That scarcity is exactly why central banks reach for it when they start worrying less about this quarter's headlines and more about the next 20 years. Interestingly, silver has been swept up in almost the exact same drama. Silver has shed roughly the same percentage from its own record high this year as gold has, trading in the high $50 range per ounce after also touching an all-time peak earlier in the year. But here's a contradiction worth sitting with. Silver is not just a monetary metal sitting quietly in vaults. It is also an industrial metal used in solar panels, electronics, and electric vehicles. That means silver gets pulled by two forces at once: the same safe haven currents moving gold and the ups and downs of global manufacturing demand. When you see silver and gold moving together, it often signals that investors are thinking about currency and inflation. When they start moving apart, it can be a signal that the industrial side of the economy is telling its own separate story. Now, here's a historical parallel that puts this in perspective. In the 1970s, the United States broke the direct link between the dollar and gold, ending what was known as the Bretton Woods system, an arrangement that had tied the value of the dollar to a fixed amount of gold since the end of the Second World War. Once that link broke, the gold was suddenly free to trade at whatever price the world decided it was worth, and it went on a wild ride. There were stretches during that decade where gold fell hard, and ordinary investors, tired of the swings, sold out near the bottom, convinced the run was finished. Then it turned and climbed to levels that shocked even the analysts who had stayed bullish the whole way through. Fast forward to 2008, during the global financial crisis. Banks were collapsing, stock markets were in freefall, and even gold briefly dipped alongside everything else, as panicked investors sold anything they could to raise cash. But once the dust settled and central banks around the world began flooding their economies with newly created money to stabilize the system, gold entered one of the strongest multi-year runs in its history. In both of those earlier episodes, the pattern looked strikingly similar to what we are watching unfold right now, a sharp, unnerving pullback driven by short-term fear, sitting right on top of a much slower, much larger structural shift that most people only recognized clearly after the fact. History does not repeat exactly, but it often rhymes, and the pattern of short-term selling colliding with long-term accumulation has shown up again and again across market cycles. So we have two forces pulling in opposite directions: retail sellers pushing the price down in the short term, central bank buyers providing a quiet floor underneath it. But there's a third piece of this puzzle that almost never gets talked about, and it might be the most important part of the entire story. Picture a gold exchange traded fund like a giant shared vault sitting somewhere in London or New York, with thousands of investors around the world, each owning a small slice of the bars inside it, without ever touching the metal themselves. When investors buy shares in the fund manager typically has to go out and buy more physical gold bars to back those shares, one for one. When investors sell and pull their money out, the reverse can happen. Bars can end up being redeemed and physically sold back into the market, quietly adding supply at the exact moment sentiment is already turning negative. According to analysts at Standard Chartered, roughly 298 tons of gold currently sitting inside these funds is being held at a loss because it was bought when prices were higher, closer to that January peak. 298 tons is not an abstract number. Picture roughly 12,000 standard gold bars, each one worth a small fortune, sitting in vaults held by investors who are currently down on their position. Think about what that means for the people holding those bars. They are sitting on paper losses, checking the market anxiously, and facing real psychological pressure to sell the very moment the price simply crawls back to where they originally bought it, just to break even and walk away clean. That creates what traders call an overhang, a wall of potential selling that can cap the price every time it tries to climb back up, almost like a ceiling nobody can see but everybody eventually bumps into. It is one of the quiet reasons gold has struggled to push convincingly back above the $4,000 mark this summer, even with all that central bank buying happening steadily underneath. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. What happens once that wall of underwater sellers finally clears? But here's an unexpected discovery inside that same problem. That overhang is not permanent. Every month that passes, every wave of forced selling that gets absorbed by patient buyers chips away at that 298-ton wall. Once it clears, and central bank demand is still sitting there underneath, the same analysts who flag the overhang as a near-term ceiling also point out that it could become the very fuel for the next leg higher, once it is worked through. Now let's bring this back to why any of this should matter to someone who has never bought an ounce of gold in their life. Think about a retiree living on a fixed pension check that arrives on the same date every month, in the same amount, year after year. That check does not grow when prices at the grocery store go up. If governments keep borrowing at this pace and inflation stays sticky the way it has this year, largely due to oil prices climbing from the conflict in the Middle East, that retirees' fixed income quietly buys a little less every single month, a little less bread, a little less gas, a little less breathing room. That is exactly the kind of slow, invisible erosion gold has historically been used to hedge against, not because it is exciting, but because it does not depend on any single government's promise to behave responsibly with its own currency. Think about a young worker in their 20s or 30s just starting to build a savings habit with decades of working life still ahead of them. A 30% pullback in gold's price this year might look genuinely scary on a chart, the kind of drop that makes anyone's stomach turn. But zoom out, and gold is still up nearly 20% compared to a year ago. Someone with a long time horizon and no plan to touch that money for 20 or 30 years experiences this kind of volatility in a completely different way than someone refreshing prices on their phone every single morning before breakfast. Think about a small business owner who imports parts or materials from overseas, watching the value of the dollar shift week to week. A stronger dollar, which is part of what pressured gold lower this year, can make those imported materials a little cheaper in the short term, a small relief on the invoice. But a stronger dollar driven by higher interest rates can also mean tighter borrowing conditions, pricier loans for expanding the business, and customers who suddenly have less to spend. These are not separate stories playing out in separate corners of the economy. They are the same underlying story about the value and stability of money itself, told from different kitchen tables, different desks, and different bank statements around the world. Now, here's a reality check, because it is important not to swing from fear straight into blind excitement. Not every analyst agrees on what happens next, and that disagreement itself is useful information, not a reason to panic in either direction. Some major banks have actually lowered their year-end price targets for gold recently. One large bank trimmed its target by roughly a quarter over the summer, pointing to the shift away from expected rate cuts and the ongoing drag from ETF outflows as the main reasons. Another major bank cut its own target as well, while still noting that if central bank buying continues in the range it has run at recently, that alone could provide a durable floor under prices, even if the more ambitious forecasts do not play out this year. Meanwhile, other voices in the market remain more upbeat, pointing to technical chart patterns and the sheer size of ongoing central bank demand as reasons the longer-term uptrend could still be intact underneath this year's correction. Markets over the coming days are also watching a busy calendar of economic data, including inflation readings and central bank meetings happening around the world, any one of which could nudge this story in a new direction almost overnight. Nobody, no matter how confident they sound in a headline or a thumbnail, can tell you with certainty exactly which of these outcomes will happen. What we can do together right now is understand the forces at play clearly enough that whichever way this breaks, you're not caught off guard. So here's the bigger pattern hiding inside all of this. Markets are not one single group of people making one single decision together. They are many different groups, sitting in different rooms, on different continents, operating on completely different time horizons, reacting to completely different signals, sometimes pulling in opposite directions at the exact same moment in the exact same asset. A falling price does not always mean fading confidence. Sometimes it means one group is nervous about next month, while another group, quietly and without fanfare, is positioning for the next 20 years. The same pattern shows up far beyond gold. It shows up in housing markets where nervous short-term buyers pull back while patient long-term investors quietly accumulate properties during the dip. It shows up in stock markets where retail traders panic sell during a downturn while large institutions use that same downturn to buy shares at a discount. Learning to tell those two groups apart, the short-term reactors and the long-term accumulators, rather than reacting only to the headline number scrolling across your screen, is probably one of the most valuable financial skills an ordinary person can develop, and it applies to a lot more than just gold. Which brings us back to where we started. Something strange really has been happening in the gold market. Retail investors have been heading for the exits. Central banks have been quietly building positions at a record pace, treating gold less like a speculative trade and more like ballast against a mountain of global government debt that keeps climbing. Underneath the surface, an overhang of underwater ETF positions has been capping the recovery, even as the longer-term structural case stays intact according to many of the analysts tracking it closely. None of this guarantees where the price goes next week, or even next month. But it does explain why the same asset can look weak on your phone screen and look like a strategic necessity inside a central bank vault at the exact same time. Understanding that gap between the short-term noise and the long-term signal is not about panic. It is about seeing the full picture clearly, so you can make decisions from a place of knowledge instead of fear. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next.